Hey everybody, this is Kim Justice, and you're listening to the Scene World Podcast.
It's the Scene World Podcast. My name's AJ. His name is Joerg. Noodles and onions. They went out to get some dinner or something.
Nice.
So in a minute, we have Dan Wood and Ravi Abbott from the Retro Hour podcast. So that's momentarily.
Exactly.
The competition coming to hang out.
Well, you know,
I'm glad that
aren't we all a big family?
Yeah, I'm glad that we went back to being a normal podcast before they came in the room.
It's always good. Well,
yeah.
How normal can it be, considering that it's Scene World?
Yeah,
we do all
true.
the crazy stuff. I mean, we aren't involved in so many things. Is there anything we didn't do yet? Not so much.
Not yet.
Yeah.
So before we get to them, we've got some news items. Do you want to start or do you want me to start?
Yeah, sure, I can start.
Okay.
So there has been discovered a previously unreleased wrestling game for the NES, which was purchased by Steven Arkan81 Reese, who is a YouTuber and specializes in retro games. And he purchased some games from a former Nintendo employee who was selling off some of his old stuff. And this game is actually UWC Wrestling, a game that was that was never released actually.
Interesting.
So, well, why it was never released is not so sure, but it's assumed it's probably because of not getting licenses
Or because it's
or
terrible.
stuffing. Yeah. Well, it's actually not so terrible. I mean, thegamer.com actually released an article about it that includes a YouTube video with footage of the game. It's a pretty good. It's a pretty good game, yeah. And they write the incredible thing about UWC Wrestling is that although it's only a prototype for an unreleased game, it's actually playable. Yeah, well, so it's basically almost finished. And the good thing is that this YouTuber made a video later on where he announced that the game was preserved. So the ROM was dumped from the prototype cartridge, and it will be released on the internet for free download, I believe.
Cool.
So that's actually pretty neat.
Now, UWC Wrestling, that's the United Wrestling Coalition, maybe? Which I don't see. That's the UWC is a wrestling coalition that is based in New Jersey, strangely. But it says here it was founded in 1998, so I doubt that could be the same as that game. Because I would think that game would have been made long before 98. 98 was towards the end of the NES's run.
Not really. No.
Well, according to this,
the
game is from 1988, so that predates the UWC.
Actually, it's not true. One of the latest games commercially released for the NES was Ducktales 2, which was released by Disney in 93. So 88 was not so much the end of the NES.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So according to this article, it stands for Universal Wrestling Corporation. So I don't know what that is.
Yep.
But so that's kind of cool that exists.
Yep.
I've got one here. There's a piece of hardware I've been seeing snippets about, but I really don't. I haven't really had an idea of what it is that I'm looking at until just now. It's called the C256 Phoenix, or Phoenix. I understand it's supposed to be Phoenix, but it's spelled Foenix, which is not how you spell Phoenix. And But this is marketed as a new retro computer based on the 65816, running at 14 megahertz, and the idea is to come up with a computer that could have possibly followed the 128 if things would have been different at Commodore. So I don't know what really the where this fits into the zeitgeist of C64 and Commodore stuff, but mock-ups for the case have just been released.
Nice.
So it's an interesting project. We'll put a link in the description to the webpage where they have like a donate link and stuff. I don't know really how far along it is and if it's going to be something that goes someplace, but it's kind of cool. Along the lines of the Mega 65, I guess, but with less hardware support. But the 8-bit guy is also working on designing his own computer, his own machine.
Oh.
Have you seen that?
No, but I only knew that he released this real-time strategy game. That was also already cool. I got a copy of that. Yeah.
Planet X2.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've got that too. No, he's there's a Facebook group about it, which is obnoxious because he's making a computer. It's called the Commander, I think it's called. The Commander 16 or something. And
Be my wing commander. No.
Well, it's a play on Commodore.
It's
another rank, but it has to use modern components off the shelf stuff that's still being produced, so it's not like older stuff. And he's got a Facebook group where it's pretty much just an unending barrage of people insisting that certain things be included, and none of these people are going to get their way because it's pretty much designed by board.
Okay.
But so he's working on that. So this may be along the same lines as that. It's another sort of retro-ish machine that's being made or being designed. But we'll see how that goes. And I'll put links to both of those things in the description so people can check out the 8-bit guy stuff, Dave's stuff, and this.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, so looks like we are at the age of re-releases for software and at the age of make your own computer.
Yeah.
Which raises the question: how many new retro focused platform computers you can support?
Well, yeah. Some of these are just it falls into the same trap that the Mega 65 falls into, which is that there's no installed software base for it, and you're never going to have a huge user base of people using the machine to pull that software. It's kind of like with electric cars, where people won't adopt an electric car until there's charging stations everywhere. But no one's going to put charging stations everywhere until everyone has electric cars. So it's kind of like it's missing part of the component with the Mega 65. We're missing the software for it. We don't have any real installed base of software because the 65 was never a machine that was made. It never went to market. So it's having a Commodore 65 or a Mega 65 is a cool novelty. And I guess because it can emulate the 64 to some degree, that kind of makes up for that. But a lot of these other machines, you're not going to have a huge base of software for it, and you're not going to have a huge amount of people using them because there's, either it's a kit machine that you have to kind of put together yourself, or you're looking at me funny.
But isn't it FPGA based? So isn't it implementation rather than emulation?
Which what are you talking about?
Because you said it emulates a Z64. But if it's FPGA based, but what I believe it is, it would not be emulating the Z64, but implementing the Z64.
Yes, but it's even with the original 65, it's C64 mode was not perfect. It was not like the 128s where you had a C64 built into it. It didn't work that way.
But even that isn't perfect. There is still software that doesn't run it.
Very, very little software. But and with the 128, it's really with the 128, it feels more like another revision of the 64. Because it's still a VIC-2 and it's still, it's just got a little bit extra that might make it wonky.
Actually, it's 3 computers in it. A CPM is also separated machine in there.
Right. Whereas the 65, I think the 65 does emulate some of the 64 stuff because it's got the VIC-3, which does not work. It's not the same as the VIC-2, so it has to pretend to be a VIC-2. And the processor is the 4502 or something. It's something weird like that. So it's not. There's a lot of it that is not the same as the 64, and it has to pretend to be. I think the SID is the only thing that's still a SID. But yeah. So I don't know how either of these are going to do as far as marketing. I know that with Dave, the 8-bit guy, he's mostly just he wants a machine that he can experiment with and stuff, which is cool. But I don't know how marketable it's going to be as far as selling and getting a user base of more than 50 people.
Right.
When you can get an Amiga or a 64 or an Atari or something and have thousands and thousands of titles that you can just grab and play right off the shelf. Whereas with this, either you got to make it or you got to wait for somebody else to make it, and in which case the thing's just sitting there collecting dust until that time.
Well, the big problem is also with such big projects where a lot of people are involved that sometimes things fall flat because of people fighting each other.
Yes.
Remember Jerry Ellsworth against Jens Schoenfeld? Yep. Which meant the Commodore 1 wasn't the computer it was meant to be.
Right.
And then, it ended in Jens saying, okay, I'm selling all the assets.
Yep.
So that's actually a dead-born system in a way. I mean, I have one. I used it for like a week, and then I figured, okay, it's not really wonderful, unfortunately. Or the Vega Plus, which is also another story where you think like, wow, what
one of them just showed up on eBay a couple of weeks ago, and there was a big brouhaha because it was a pre-production version. It wasn't one of the V2s, which I guess the V2 had a bunch of the games taken out of it, and it wasn't, it was a lot crappier. This is one of the very first versions that was like 3D printed and was used as a demo unit in the very beginning, so it's got a couple hundred games, and it showed up on eBay, and I think it got pulled off of eBay because it was pretty much just stolen material.
Ooh. Well, so the big problem here is, let's hope that such teams like the Mega 65 won't fall apart.
Yeah.
Because that's not only is the issue of getting user bases supporting the machine, but also the creators not falling apart.
Well, Mega 65 seems to be doing pretty good. It's a slow, steady slog, but they're doing it. And again, the great thing with that is that when it is done, they will be selling some units, which will be pretty expensive. But they're also going to be releasing the schematics to the machine, to the public domain, so that anyone, if you want to make your own, Jens could go and produce one of his own to release through individual. Or anybody else that wanted to do it could make their own production boards through this. It won't be as, the Mega 65 guys will have the case and the drive and the keys and all that stuff to go along with it, which would be nice. But you could just but anybody else could just get one and throw it in like a 128 case and have the full keyboards and all that junk, or a 64 case,
I still hope the 128 RM is happening.
I do too. I really like the idea of that. I see it's still there. The site is still there. There's not too much information on it. I'm hoping he's slogging away at it. We talked to him a few podcasts ago, and it seemed really, it seemed like it had a lot of potential. And I'm still jazzed about it. I still want to see that happen.
And he spoke like he knew what he was talking about.
Oh, definitely. He definitely knew what he was talking about. There's Siri.
Yeah. Right.
Right on cue. Speaking of Jens, we talked last time about how he may be dumping some of the Commodore stuff, depending on how these dumping the Amiga stuff. There is currently, for anyone who is upset about the possible disappearance of some accelerator boards, there is a new accelerator being developed for the 1200. It is called the Warp 1260. It is a 68060 at 50 megahertz, which can be overclocked up to 100 megahertz. It's got 256 megs of RAM, RTG graphics, fast hardware blitter, port for optional flicker fixer, 16-bit stereo audio codec, onboard fast ATA CF ports, additional cache, and there's an ARM MCU that isn't being used.
Nice.
That has just been released. Information about that has been released. There's no price announced. I'm sure it's going to be ludicrous because, just a 68060 will set you back over $100 just for the processor. And it's supposed to come out later this year.
Oh, and the Turbo Chameleon version 2 by Individual Computers is back available in the store too.
Sweet.
Yeah. It wasn't available for a few years, if I remember correctly, and the prices on eBay were insane for it.
Yeah. They were approaching super CPU prices, which is kind of ridiculous because they're over $1,000. I just saw a super CPU they were asking almost $2,000 for.
I know, yeah.
The Turbo Chameleon at this point is faster than the Super CPU, and it's like, what, $300?
Yeah. And Jens always said, don't throw your money on eBay. I will make new batches, but people were not patient enough.
Mm-hmm. Gotta have it now.
Yeah. There seem to be a lot of people with deep pockets.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't ever do that.
Well, you've got a super CPU, though. How much did you pay for that?
Well, I bought it 21 years ago at the original price, which was like 200, around 280 euros.
Okay.
Which was the original price.
Oh, you got it from CMD.
I got it from CSW Publishing. He was the German distributor, one of the German distributors of CMD. Yeah, so I bought the original package with the Super CPU 64 version 2 and the Super RAM card with 60 megabytes of RAM. I've saved a lot of pocket money and Christmas money and money from relatives, aunts money, birthday money, just to be able to buy this one thing.
And now,
I never regretted it.
And now, if you need to buy a house, you can just put it on eBay.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Well. That's the news I've got so far.
Okay.
But you sent me a link to this new piece of hardware for better graphics.
Oh yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's an FPGA based video enhancement for the 64. Copper Dragon is a modder that has created an enhancement that'll improve the quality and overall video signal coming from the 64 to your monitor. So, yeah, it looks like a little FPGA board with a VIC adapter. That cleans up the output signals.
Nice. And you have to build it yourself.
Yeah, you do.
Ooh.
But there's instructions on how to do it, and maybe It'll end up being produced. But this is one of those things too, where I'm looking at the video that it produces, and it's nice and very sharp. And again, this stuff wasn't meant to be sharp.
I know. You have in Europe you have this PAL blur.
Yes.
Because of the mashed up colors and all this stuff. And I think NTSC has something similar.
Yes. Well, I was using with my Amiga 500. I've had that hooked up for a while now, and I was using it with a VGA monitor because it's got a scan doubler in it, and it's got so I've got VGA output going to it, and it's a nice sharp picture, and it looks really good. But I didn't want to lug that monitor out, so I just hooked it up to the same S-Video monitor that because I've got S-Video, I've got a little adapter that turns the RGB signal into S-Video. So I plugged that into the thing that I use for the 64, and it's a whole different world. This stuff looks totally different under S-Video with this fuzzier picture, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is what it's supposed to look like. The graphics look better, fuzzier. Even though I can't see every individual pixel, and God forbid I use an interlace mode because my eyes will bleed from the flicker, this is what it's supposed to look like.
I know. And it's not like you can't get a C64 reloaded with S-Video out,
right?
Or like well, I have to say the 1084 monitor that I mainly use for the Commodore 64 has a perfectly sharp picture.
Oh yeah, oh god, yeah, and that's the same thing as the thing I've got. It's a flat panel that I have. It's a sharp, and but it's an SD flat panel, so it's the same kind of pixel size as you get on a 1080. And this thing, the image I get with S-Video from my 64 is easily just as good as what I used to get on my 1902 with the separate, Chroma Luma signals, or the 1802 that I had, or any of the monitors that I had. Way better than the 1702 that I had. That was a very sharp, usable picture. Because you got to remember, the pixels on the 64 are not that small compared to the pixel sizes of, I think those were like 640 by 480. The actual pixels on your monitor, and the 64 is putting out 320 by 200. So it's roughly the same, bigger pixels than what your screen has. So there's really no upscaling or anything like that needed. It's already like it can't get much sharper than that.
But then you have things for solutions like Framemeister, which is the most known solution for putting old retro computers and consoles on modern TFT or OLED displays.
They don't belong on those displays. It doesn't. And as much as I'm all for adapting it and be using it on newer stuff, like it just doesn't look good on high def displays. It just doesn't.
Oh, did we mention last time that Nintendo announced Link's Awakening will be rebooted for the Switch?
We did not.
Well, though the Game Boy Classic game of Link's Awakening will be rebooted for the Switch.
Cool.
This means there will be now 3 versions, because there was an original Game Boy version, then there was this Link Zelda. Sorry, it's called Zelda Link's Awakening, and the original Zelda was for the Game Boy, for the classic Game Boy. Then there was Zelda Link's Awakening DX for the Game Boy Color, and now there will be this one for the Switch.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are in the age of reboots again.
Yeah.
Right. And that would be all the news I have.
That's all I got.
Right. Oh. So, back to the British podcasters.
Dan and Ravi are sitting right there. quietly waiting for us to finish up, and we've talked for way too long. So,
as always.
Yeah. So let's go flip over to them.
So today we are talking with Ravi Abbott and Dan Woods, right?
Yeah, exactly. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the podcast.
Right. So let's start a bit with how did you actually got into retro computing, or as other people say, computer trash collection or something.
I'll let you go first, Ravi.
Yeah, I was always into Amiga. I was like hugely passionate, and I kind of kept with it till 2001, which was crazy. So it was still modded. It wasn't retro for me then. But then I started using PCs like everybody else, and ended up kind of getting more into the old scene, looking at stuff like the Dreamcast, which I've never really played with, and started going to more events as well. So started going, seeing lots of people out there, and then thought, why don't I do some YouTube videos, put them out there, and that's how I met Dan.
Yeah, I think my story is pretty similar. I mean, I grew up with Commodore machines. The Commodore Plus 4 was my first computer. I don't know if you guys remember that one.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't one of their most popular machines. But then, yeah, after that, I got an Amiga as well. I mean, we had a few consoles and stuff at home too. But really, it was kind of, I got out of computers really for a few years when I went away to university in the early 2000s. I got into, DJing and music and girls and that kind of thing. I wasn't a nerd for about 2 years. And then rediscovered my love for, these classic machines. I think for me, getting back into retro was probably, I think I bought a game off eBay. Didn't even have a machine to play it on. Just thought I wouldn't mind like an Amiga game just to put on the shelf or something. And this was about 2005 probably. And the guy I bought it off actually gave me the Amiga 600 for free with the game. Then I set it up and started playing games again. So that was really what got me back into retro, really. So
before eBay went haywire and prices went up. Wow.
I got it £5 I paid for a game and an Amiga 600, yeah.
Wow, I envy you already. It's interesting because I always have discussions with seller like, what you sent me is trash. I can't play the game because it doesn't load. I'm like, why? Are you even playing the game? I thought you put it on your shelf just to look at it. I'm like, no, I'm actually using my retro machines. So I'm sorry for that.
Well, the games are there to be played, aren't they? I agree. I mean, now if I buy software or games or whatever, I want to use it. Yeah, I'm not like a software collector at all anymore. I buy stuff to play with it.
Yeah, I'm a big collector. This is my CD32 collection. So very nerdy. Yeah, I love collecting games, but I do play them as well. I don't keep them wrapped in the packages.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, and my friends in the retro scene, they are getting tears when I get a 83, a game for the Commodore 64, and I unwrap it. So, like unopened, and the first time I have this smell of the early 80s.
The 80s, yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, I get that. I actually did a video on YouTube of the Atari Jaguar. That's one of the few systems I'm trying to get a full collection for. I mean, I do play the games on it too, but there's not that many games for it, so they're actually quite, you can collect the full set. But I unwrapped a few games, unboxed them that had never been opened, and the hate I got from people, they were furious that I dared open them, and I'm like, these games were made to be played.
Yeah.
Unleash the YouTube comments on you.
Oh, they did. They went to town.
So how did it go from there? I mean, making your biggest podcast in retro in the UK is quite a big step, I guess, from starting from collecting games and playing them and rediscovering the old computers. So that's a big step.
Yeah, I mean, it was a few years after really that we got into the I mean, I did a podcast about 12 years ago, actually, when podcasting had its first kind of wave. One called Logic Weekly. It was kind of a rip-off of This Week in Tech that I did with an American guy called Creighton. We did that for a while, but then podcasting seemed to kind of vanish a bit, didn't it, towards the end of the last decade? And then, like Ravi said, both of us were doing YouTube. That's how Ravi and I met because, we lived in the same town. We both had YouTube channels. Then I think we're actually in Amsterdam, weren't we, Ravi, when we came up with the idea?
Yeah, because we'd gone to the Amiga 30 event in Amsterdam, and it was kind of like we decided to report it together, and we made like a little cheesy video. It was quite good. But we didn't get any hits or anything. So we thought, well, we're interviewing these people and, people aren't being able to hear it. So we kind of got together, said, let's make a podcast. And Dan's got a lot of radio experience. I'd done pirate radio when I was a kid, DJing and stuff like that, but nothing professional. So he suggested podcasting, and just when we started was when the kind of podcasting wave started again.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we only intended to do like 1 or 2 episodes and kind of see how it went. And then I think one of our first episodes, we got like about 1,000 listeners, and we were like, wow, like, we couldn't believe it. So
interesting about this event you mentioned, it was actually famous for Petro Tichenko writing the longest complaint post in the life of Facebook about how bad organized this event was.
I did an interview with him there, and I was like, I wanted to know about all the SCOM stuff, Gateway and everything, and I interviewed him, and I got nothing out of him. He was just totally closed,
Seriously? Okay.
Yeah. I've got it on YouTube. It's about 3 minutes long, because that's the only footage I could use.
Oh, jeez.
in the end, he's like, enough about that now, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah, actually, the way I got to know about you, Dan, is actually YouTube suggested me your David Pleasant's interview.
Yeah.
And this is how I got to know you. And a bit later at the Amiga 32 event in Neuss, Germany, I actually met him. And thanks to your interview, I knew who he was. So,
I've been working quite closely with David over the last couple of years. I mean, I've actually just, this week, just finished his audiobook. I've narrated the audiobook that I finished on, I think it was Thursday. It took me about 4 months to do it. So it took quite a while. I've been spending about 5 hours a day in the studio for the last couple of weeks editing it and everything. Finally finished. But yeah, really interesting story. Don't know if you guys have read his book, have you?
Yeah, sure. Amazing.
Yeah, and the first time we met him was at Amiga 30 as well. That was like the first time David came back to the Amiga scene as well. He was clueless about all the Gateway stuff and all the later stuff that had happened,
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a sad story that this all ended in Germany the way it did. So I wonder, because I was also a guest at your show, and you do this weekly.
Yeah.
This must be incredible to speak to
Lord.
pioneers weekly. I mean, AJ and I, we are happy if we talk to a person every month, because a lot of times you email people, you make up arrangements, and then it's not happening, or they don't answer you. And mostly what I do is I call people on the phone, because you get more likely a response than via email. I don't know if you have the same experience.
And this is almost a full-time gig, doing it just monthly with the amount of editing and everything else.
We had no idea what we were letting ourselves in for.
Yeah, we're like, every week, that'll be fine, But
Ravi gets most of the guests, to be fair. You do work hard on that, don't you?
Yeah. I basically chat to a lot of people online, and if you have, mutual friends, so you can say, oh, this guy's been on the show, then it gets easier. Like, when we first started, it was hard. I'm not going to lie. We had a few times where we were just waiting the night before for the phone to ring. I think we had 5 minutes to go and no guests. So, there's hard times, but now it's a lot easier talking to people, kind of on Twitter as well. It's so direct with the internet that you can just tweet someone, DM them straight away. It's mad.
Interesting. So, I actually, we had a lot of guests that we had in common, the two of us actually, and sometimes I figure it's sometimes a lot of surprise from people how we got that person. And when we first started it, people asked us if this is fake or we really talked to that person in question. So, what was the first reaction when you started the podcast? Did you also get responses in disbelief, or I'm not sure, but I think from my experience, the retro area is very skeptic when you come up with something new.
Yeah, I mean, we do get people saying, "Oh, I can't believe you got that person. How did you get them?" I don't think we've ever had anyone say, "Is that fake or not?" Yeah, that's a new one. We haven't had that yet, but yeah, we do often get people that are like astounded that you managed to get someone. Especially, I think it's not always like the really big names. Sometimes it can just be someone who maybe did something but has never spoken about it. I think they're some of my favorite interviews that we do. We've had a few, like, we had Tony Takushi on like this weekend, and it was, the first time we'd really spoken about a lot of the stuff we did talk about since the 80s. He said, I'm trying to wrap my memory, and it's been 30 years since I even mentioned all this. So when you get people like that who, you're kind of the first person to document that story, that's always a bit of an honor, really, I guess.
Yeah, I have the same feeling. And sometimes you are really nervous, like when we talk to Charles Martinet. I think HA remembers that pretty much.
Yeah, I remember that because my microphone malfunctioned.
Yeah, I mean, we do get a bit starstruck sometimes. There has been a couple. Yeah. Ravi's had a couple like of his all-time favorite games, like that you grew up playing when you were a kid, and yeah.
And the worst thing is as well recording an episode and kind of, if we delete an episode, we've not done that yet, but record over an episode or something. Mm-hmm. God, that would be awful if we had an interview.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I check it constantly as it records. Yeah,
definitely.
Now we switch to Skype cloud recording, so Skype is doing the job for us.
Well, I'm doing the regular call recording as well, just as a backup, because, again, I don't trust anything.
Worst we had was with live shows and losing recordings on live shows, or the buttons not being pressed on the little audio recorder or something like that.
Oh, we tried so many solutions. Yeah, we got like, really high-end like Zoom recorders and all that kind of thing. We had a nightmare with them. In the end, we ended up just buying like a laptop and plugging that in via a USB or a line in. And you can see it on screen then.
Cheap laptop,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, what is the achievement you are the most proud of, actually?
I'd probably say Play Expo London, because that was crazy. We had to host talks live on stage, and God, it was like 12 talks in 2 days.
Yeah.
And I think we had like 5 minutes between each one. So Dan was just shoving food down his face. I was getting some water, and God, it was just crazy.
Yeah, and we did like what we do. How many of those events did we do last year? Because we do 4 for Play Expo every year, and they're all similar. They're like they're the biggest retro gaming events in the UK, and we partnered with them probably about 2 years ago now. Is it about 2 years ago?
We must have done about 10 events last year.
Yeah, but we host all their talks throughout the weekend. So we'll get there on a Saturday, do about 5 panels. Then Sunday, the same 5 panels again. And we do them all over the UK, like London, Manchester, Glasgow, Blackpool. So we're already getting those lined up this summer as well. And we kind of control, the lineup of who's going to be there too. We get a lot of kind of say in which guests we're going to invite to the show. And, doing the podcast in front of a live audience is something else, because when we started doing it, I mean, you see numbers of downloads and stuff on a screen, but until you meet people in person, they don't seem like real people. They're just numbers on the screen, aren't they? But when you're doing an event and you've got like 500 people in front of you, and like they're all coming up to you and saying they love the show and they listen every week, that makes it all worthwhile, I think.
So you never thought you would be so successful so quick?
No, we literally did it just to try out. Yeah, I mean, we thought if 10 people listened, great, but yeah, it just kind of snowballed, really.
And it was kind of like our first guest was Alistair Brimble, and I'd interviewed him before, and it was like, this is a name that I used to see on all the Amiga titles when I was a kid, Alistair Brimble, and I'd be like, this music's amazing. So that was it, just to get those guys out there, and more people to hear about them,
Yeah, I think that's one of the aims that we had, isn't it? I mean, it's we get people on our show that we want to know their stories as well, and we're interested in them. And we have various guests. It could be people that ran companies or made games, or we often get YouTubers on, or maybe other podcasts as well, just because it's good conversation, and anything we talk about, we find it fascinating too, which I think really helps.
But you stick with the retro theme. You're not breaking out into other areas, I guess.
Well, the show's called the Retro Hour, so it's kind of limited to that, I guess.
We do some stuff about hacking as well, but that kind of goes into the retro stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's one thing we said. It's not just games, our show. I mean, gaming is like the main part of it, but we had like Captain Crunch on, John Draper last year, talking about, phone freaking and...
well, he's special.
It was really interesting
Our
chat.
favorite person.
Yeah, it was like, being able to talk about really geeky stuff like that, phone freaking and hacking. And we've had people on talking about old mainframes in the 60s and doing mud games on them and the ARPANET. And, we're both interested in computers as well as games, so we do cover that too.
Do you have a script where you write down what you want to ask, or do you just go in a conversation?
Yeah. How do you do the podcast? Because we need tips because we're terrible.
Yeah, I mean, we do tend to do guide questions. So say we're doing an interview with someone and it's going to be like an hour long and we'll maybe edit that down to like 40, 45 minutes. We generally do about maybe 25, 30 like guide questions just to kind of get the narrative in place. But often when you're chatting, other questions will just spring up. But we like to do a bit of research beforehand and have a bit of structure.
Yeah, we do like about an hour or two research for each guest and then put out about 30 or 40 questions and then we can just go through them on the interview. And if like the other person's not that well informed, you can go off your microphone and just explain the kind of thing. And it works well because it means one of us is only doing the research, so they can kind of conduct the flow of the interview and lead to questions that lead to more kind of interesting answers or new knowledge.
Yeah, we try and do it like we've talked about it like a sandwich really. So we'll start off with like your introductions and your hellos and the early bit, and then the meat in the middle of the sandwich is the main bit of the story that we want to know about. That's when they had this famous game in the 80s or 90s, and then the other piece of bread, the end of the sandwich, is kind of what they're doing now and maybe any products they want to promote. But we kind of like try and do a story arc, so it's kind of goes from start to finish.
I hope that was a joke that we are terrible, because I don't think so, AJ.
No.
I've watched you guys. You're very good.
We're very good at editing. Editing to make it look like we know what we're doing.
Yeah, always cut down. Never do an interview too short.
Yeah.
Always do it too long and trim it.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I always notice is that when you talk to people from abroad, you often have to convince them because they tell us, my English is too bad. And then you spend like weeks saying them, no, don't worry, it's not live, it will be okay, it will be fine, we will edit it, it will sound great. So how is it for you? Do you have the same problem, or don't people bother about the language?
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of had people say that before, but I think people kind of, they put themselves down. They don't think they're as good as they are, so it's generally not a problem.
And if they're a big enough name or interesting enough, people will come anyway. Even if the accent's hard, they'll kind of they'll bear with.
Right.
Yeah. Well, just so to know, are there people you didn't think you would get and you got in the end? Are there any names that surprised yourself you got them?
I think the big one for us at first that I remember in probably our first year, I think, we had two that I remember. When we've got Tom Kalinske, used to be the manager of Sega America. Literally, that was just, I think Ravi tweeted him one day and he replied next day, yeah, cool, I'll do it. And we're like, whoa, we expected to have to work on that for ages. And Joerg, you actually helped us get Nolan Bushnell on our show as well, which, we're really grateful for. And he was on for our 100th episode. And as you guys know, because you had him on your show too, Joerg, it's like you've got to, when you get to a certain level, they've often got like PR people or agencies. You've got to kind of go around the back door, and they're always more difficult. But sometimes the cold approach works. But also there was a show here in the UK. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, called Gamesmaster. That everyone watched in the early 90s. All the kids at school watched it. It was like, the video game show. And there's a guy that used to be on there who actually runs he's called Dave Perry. And he runs a tattoo shop these days, completely got out of video games. We tracked him down, I think, on Facebook, got hold of him, got him on to talk about, for the first time ever, talk about this show that everyone used to watch. And now he's actually quite active on the scene again. He started doing his own YouTube channel and his own podcast, and he's coming to live events and everything. But it was really us like tracking him down that got him back into it, which is really cool.
Yeah, sometimes I take like 10 years to find somebody.
Yeah.
And for some people, it's like crazy. Anybody else would have given up already, you know?
Yeah, you have to do detective work sometimes, don't you?
Yeah.
Like trying to find them on LinkedIn, or, you know, what variation of their name are they on Twitter, and, like, you know, look at friends lists and stuff. So it can be a bit of like detective work going into it.
Calling relatives in Sweden.
Waiting outside the house.
The nicest thing for me is kind of when they come into the studio in person.
Yeah.
We've had a guy, Ian Livingstone. He was like the founder of Games Workshop, and he also did IDOS as well. So, you know, Tomb Raider and all of those games. And him coming in person was amazing. He was telling us about how he started Games Workshop, and he was sleeping in a van for a while, and, you know, then it turned into this massive company. And he's actually from Nottingham, where it was founded. So that was really cool.
And he's got a knighthood as well, hasn't he? He's like,
yeah.
But he's coming to town to do a talk. So he goes, I'll come in the studio and do it with you. So we're like, yeah, awesome.
Nolan Bushnell surprised me a bit that you didn't get a hold of him. But I figured from what I heard, he needs to have friends to refer to him. So yeah. I know Walter Day, and Walter Day thinks whoever I think is capable of talking to Nolan must be very good. So this is how you got this reference, because I said these guys, they are knowing what they are doing. So that is actually why. But there are people generally who say they will never do an interview, and I think that's very sad, because those stories will be lost forever at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the aims of our show. It's, you know, we want to get this stuff recorded for future generations to listen to it. Otherwise, like you said, if people don't make note of this and document it, no, you know, when we're not here anymore in, like, you know, 50, 100 years, whatever, no one will know about it.
Right. But you can't say to a person, I want to interview you before you die.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you say that. We've actually had, you know, it's sadly a few of our guests that we've had on in the last couple of years, probably about 2 or 3 of them have passed away since we did the interviews. So it's great that we did get a chance to record them while they were alive. One that springs to mind, obviously, you guys all know Ben Daglish, legendary Commodore 64 musician. And he actually, one of our early shows, he came into the studio as well. It was snowing, really heavy snowstorm, and he drove about 40 minutes in his car to come and sit with us. You know, we'd only been going about maybe 2 months. He was such a lovely guy, though, and, like, you know, we had barely any audience then, but he actually came in and wanted to support the show in our early days. So we're always very grateful for that.
Yeah. And I think there was somebody from Cinemaware too that you interviewed, and that he died afterwards, if I'm not mistaken.
We had Bob Wakelin, who did the Ocean Arts. Yeah. I'm trying to think of who from Cinemaware.
But we've had nearly 160 guests. Sometimes we forget.
Yeah. I tell you, the search function on my new website is saving me. Yeah.
I had a guy, actually, I was looking at his Facebook over Christmas, and I thought he'd make a really good guest. And I was about to message him, and I just got, you know, distracted. And then Ravi made our new website, and I saw this guy's name on there. We had him on 2 years ago. I nearly made a fool of myself and messaged him and asked him to come on, but we'd already done it 2 years ago. Luckily, I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to some people for our history videos, and some people are already like 88 or something.
Yeah.
So,
and I think you often find the older they get, maybe they're more likely to do the interviews and talk about it because they want to, you know, leave their legacy as well, I guess, which is why sometimes when you get these names, so you think really famous people that would never do, like, you know, a little podcast in England, but they actually will because, yeah, they want to share their stories. I think that's probably part of it too.
Right.
Oh, interesting. So that means I will keep asking people for 20 years.
Yeah, just keep going.
Yeah.
Until they are too old to refuse.
Never give up.
That's a good tactic.
I think a lot of people like Bruce Artwick, we talked about, just doesn't want to do it because, you know, it's the same story over and over, and he doesn't want to talk about it. But then, as like you said, as they get older, you know, you really want to get this stuff down and preserved before you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, we've got a guest coming up this week, actually. One of the things he said to us was, you know, I've told the story a million times, I'll do it, but only on the condition that you don't ask me the same questions that everyone else did. You know, so we're going to try and do something completely different with him, which is, you know, it's cool to do.
Right.
I mean, we do that all the time, right, AJ? I remember.
That's one of the main reasons that we wanted to do this was because we see interviews, we see podcasts, and people ask the same kind of questions, and it's like that's not what I want to know. I want to know about this stupid random other thing that nobody ever talks about.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the fun part for us is getting to dive into things that aren't just the cookie cutter, how did you get started in computers and how did you start your thing,
Yeah. Or it might be that story you read in a magazine 25 years ago. Was it really true?
Right.
That.
Yeah.
Yeah, for example, when AJ, I think it was Ron Gilbert, where he said he coined the cutscene phrase, and he was like, "Wow, I'm surprised you know that." So, that's quite interesting.
Yeah,
it's true.
It's always good to have that research where people are suddenly like, "Oh, I can't believe you knew about that," and it just takes them to a different place,
Yeah, you're right. It's always a buzz, isn't it, when they said, "Wow, you guys have really done your research." You're like, "Yeah."
Nerds.
So you guys also have, aside from the podcast, you've also got your own YouTube channels where you do related stuff to this. You also do retro stuff on that as well, correct?
Yeah, we've both had YouTube channels for, I think, when did you start yours, Ravi? 2006?
Yeah, just really, really early on. And then I kind of lost momentum, and then YouTube got popular, and I was like, but I met Dan through that, so yeah. And you got quite big, didn't you, for a while, Dan?
Yeah, with my channel, I've not done a video for about 3 months, but I've been moving house, and then we had Christmas and everything. We're going to get back on with doing them probably next week. But yeah, it's kind of our YouTube channels are not really. We cover retro stuff and that on there, but I also do modern stuff, I did a video about mechanical keyboards, and the Raspberry Pi stuff's actually some of my most popular stuff on YouTube. Or it might be digital radio reviews on microphones. So kind of, it's more just my channel stuff I'm interested in, but obviously the podcast does kind of, attract a similar audience.
Well, I've been studying kind of doing 4K recently and trying to edit that all day, and it's been driving me mad because I recently went to America and there was a huge IBM collection that a collector had, and I filmed it, so I'm going to put that up on YouTube, and that's about 20 minutes long, and it's got some Rev A boards and very early IBM stuff, so I'll be showing all of that. It should be good fun once I get this 4K madness sorted.
and Ravi's building an Amiga laptop as well, aren't you?
Yeah. Really?
At the moment it's just for fun. It's kind of out of wood. We're trying to get it battery powered. It's a A600. We're going to run it off lithium batteries, but it's got the potential to blow up, so I'm going to leave it in the shed instead of in the house.
Burn down the shed.
Just, spontaneously combust.
And it's made out of wood, you said?
Yeah, wood at the moment, yeah.
Okay.
And then I'll make it smaller in the future, hopefully.
Interesting. And then you make a Kickstarter out of it, and you sell it in big numbers.
Exactly.
I don't want to get into the hardware game. Give the plans away for free. But
you are actually working Amiga related with Friends OS, right?
Yeah, they're kind of a bit more focused in. I've worked with Friend for about a year and a half. Just on a freelance basis, I kind of help them out doing videos and that kind of thing. They've kind of moved quite away from their Amiga roots now. They're more into more the blockchain kind of community and, kind of internet on devices, that kind of thing at the moment. So it's getting a bit more into the corporate side of stuff. But obviously it's got, Amiga and Commodore people working behind the scenes on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I worked there as well. I was coding web apps for them.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of conversions of games and stuff, and it's a nice OS. Yeah, it's had some interesting ideas. It's just I'm not a fan of the cryptocurrency stuff. I prefer the Amiga stuff, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was good though. You could run some nice stuff in there, and there was some good work on there. So I hope that they come out with something really cool in the future.
Nice. It's quite interesting that you guys are making so much similar things. Sorry, I mean different things. And you are just 2 people. So you must have no other free time doing all that other stuff.
Yeah, I often get to the end of the week and think, where did this week go? Yeah, it is a bit like that sometimes.
Yeah, Dan's very busy all the time. I do web design freelance as well, so it's a bit more chilled out, but I need to get out the house and, walk around the park and make sure I don't go crazy. Right.
What do you guys think of the Italian Commodore resurgence, or not resurgence, but the phone stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I see it as, it's a company who've got the name, and I think the hardware is just kind of imported from China from what I've seen of it. So, but I mean, no one's doing anything with the name, so if they can bring it back and make it successful, then fair play to them.
I haven't seen it. Is it the old... That Commodore phone where it looked like an Android one?
Yes.
Yeah. Commodore Pet phone that came out last year. Yeah. I think it is just a standard Android phone with the Commodore logo.
We got a demo unit and we did a review of it, and it was just, it's just your generic, it's an Orgitech phone from China that they imported. And this is a new one, the Leo, that I guess hit production snags because there was some dispute over the name, but they just won the right to use the name.
And, I think it's cool to see the name out there again. I mean, if you could walk into a phone shop and see a big Commodore banner, that's going to be awesome. It's so. And it could be the start.
Play with UAE.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, they could start doing these phones, and then if they get popular enough, they could branch out into other stuff. So it's cool that someone is doing something worthwhile with it.
I wonder, as you are so famous, do you get a lot of requests? Yeah, well, I mean,
autographs outside, yeah.
other people say you are famous. You obviously don't think so yourself.
Well, there's a couple of guys who chat about nerdy stuff,
Okay.
So, that's the way we see it. And if people are interested in listening to it, great.
I think the best thing that I've ever got because of the podcast has been free drinks. So you go to a place and someone goes, I like your podcast, have a free drink. And then I'm happy with that.
I think there are some events we go to where we don't actually buy a drink all weekend.
That's what we need to get, Joerg, because that's not the recognition that we've been getting. We've just been getting like, oh, hey, you're that dude. But then no one buys me anything free. No, I don't get any drinks.
Then you get drunk. Yeah, then you get drunk and you can't remember it next day.
So You right there, Joerg?
Yeah, sure. I'm just having a bit of a cough today. Sorry for that.
I've had that too. Yeah, nasty cold.
Yeah, that's right.
So I wonder, where do you want to go? Do you have any plans? I mean, you are growing quite big already, especially in the podcast field. Is there any other field you want to cover in the future? Are there any plans of expansion?
Yeah, well, I think we'd like to do our own kind of events. I mean, at the moment we kind of piggyback on other events, but it would be cool if we can kind of get something of our own going. And we are in talks to. It's not going to be anything that's going to be huge at first, but we have got maybe a few local ones in our town that we are going to be doing that we think will attract an interested crowd. And in terms of the show itself, I mean, we've had a little refresh of it recently, got a new logo, a new website, and we're having a little change to the format soon, just tweaking things here and there to keep it fresh. Because, we're into our fourth year now, and it just, I think, so it doesn't get kind of, no major changes, just to kind of give it a lick of paint, really, so it sounds a bit fresh.
And also, the new website really helps because our old one was awful. And this one can basically really be a good foundation for us to start doing stuff like publishing maybe some news content, retro articles, get some of our listeners to contribute and get them more involved with the podcast. So it's not just me and Dan as well. Maybe if our listeners produce news, then we'll have more items to speak about.
Yeah, I think Ravi's right about that. It's one thing we want to do, kind of grow the community side of it as well, and get the audience more involved. So, I mean, we often do get a lot of news submissions. They'll send us stories that they've spotted, but it would be nice to have kind of a bit more of that going on our website. And with the logo, we redesigned that just a little bit recently to give it a bit more of our own identity. So it's something that we've come up with ourselves rather than, being too heavily influenced on other things.
You mentioned the homepage. Aren't most listeners using iTunes?
Yeah. A lot are using iTunes or apps on Android as well. But on the homepage, we're going to have competitions. We're going to do newsletters and stuff like that as well. But we might have a little merchandise store and stuff like that as well. So.
Yeah. I think that is one way that we do generally get a lot of hits on our website. If we do competitions, go and get hundreds and hundreds of entries for some of the competitions that we run. So that's one good way to drive traffic to it. But yeah, we'd like more of the audience to go on the website and interact with us a bit more that way rather than just downloading it on iTunes, for example.
Interesting that you mentioned it. Yeah, interesting that you mentioned it. Because, there is this German site about video game stories where people talk about their childhood memories when they went to a store and bought the games and how the stores were and what was on the newspaper about video games and all that stuff. But there's no English platform like that for, video game related end user stories from abroad. Those stories on the German page are all from Germany. And I always think it would be great to have somebody to work with to make an English version of that, covering all the stories from all over the world, especially Latin America would be interesting, or UK or something, because I have no idea how things in UK were or how things in America were, And sometimes people even made pictures, like stupid pictures of a Toys R Us carrying Commodore 64 stuff or Amiga stuff.
Yeah, I think everyone remembers their own game shop they used to go to as a kid, don't they? And the shop you go to every Saturday, and
So if you have a little space in your homepage left, that's just something I would be totally working with you on.
I can see Ravi doing it, looking at the HTML.
Yeah. No, that'd be good. We could have users' experiences or kind of memories as well. Because at the moment we've got users' images of them listening to the Retro Hour. So they're posting a guy posted on a plane recently and stuff like that. It's quite fun.
We had a guy in India, didn't we? Posted outside a temple and stuff. And we've
Taj Mahal, that was
Taj Mahal, yeah, that was it, yeah.
Wow.
And we've had a guy in the desert in Australia and someone up mountains in Alaska, and it's like
we had one which was really weird, but I can't find the picture anymore. It was a policeman who was cleaning his gun, and he had the Retro Hour next to it from Finland. That was cool.
Oh gosh, okay.
Dark.
Yeah.
I didn't see that though.
That is something that a lot of Americans don't understand, that wearing a gun is not really cool in Europe.
Yeah, it's a bit scary.
Yeah, I went to the South recently in America, and they had all the doors were like, leave your firearms outside, check your weapons at the door.
Yeah.
I was like, wow.
Yeah. Oh, you were in the real South then.
I went to Atlanta. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And,
yeah.
Yeah, it was quite good fun.
Yeah, it's
lots of food.
Yeah.
Yeah, when Ravi went away, we had to record about a month's worth of podcasts in 1 week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, well, I don't know if you like the idea, but if you're up to it, maybe we should talk about it.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's cool.
Yeah, we could even make a category for it. So
yeah. Because I don't think that our team has enough resources for yet another branch, because we are doing so much at Scene World.
I don't have any time for it.
Yeah, I mean, yes. you know it. You interviewed me already. We do everything.
Yeah, I was going to say, you must be busy. See, you don't just do videos and podcasts. You do so much, don't you?
Which is actually a good question. Did you ever consider doing more, like growing your team and doing more stuff, or are you fine with just you and Ravi and the two of you and not doing more group stuff?
Well, we do have a slightly bigger team. There's a guy called Joe who he's on our podcast occasionally. Maybe once a month he'll come in, and we have with Paul Kitching. He does all of our graphics for us. And we have a guy called James who's been helping us out recently with in terms of getting sponsors and advertising. He joined our team back in about October last year, wasn't it? September, October. Yeah. So we've actually got some sponsorship recently on the show as well. So he's been good for that. So there's about about 5 of us at the moment working on it, but it would be nice to maybe get a few more people on deck as well, to ease the workload a little bit.
So you have people in the background. Okay.
Yeah. So I kind of do the website and other stuff like that, but Dan is the big editing guy, and he does that. And then we have when we do events, we have Joe who comes along with Alex as well, and they go and flyer absolutely everyone and get them all kind of involved. So
drag them over to the stage and get them watching.
Yeah, and then we have a great friend who's Paul Jury from Retro Gamer, and he really helps with events because my dad used to do events with him. So he's actually bringing Matthew Smith to play Manchester. So, the guy who did Minor Willie.
Manic Miner.
Manic Miner, that's it, and Jet Set Willie.
Yeah. Who got famous for his teeth, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he had a slight drug addiction at one stage. But he was a genius programmer as a kid, but he was one of these he was a superstar when he was 14 years old. And it got a bit overwhelming for him. Yeah. Legend. Then he vanished for a long time. No one knew where he was, and there was actually a website set up in about 99, 2000 called whereismatthewsmith.com. There was a worldwide hunt for him, and there's all these stories that he'd been seen in a monastery in Thailand, all these sightings around the world. But he's actually come back onto the scene again a bit recently. So it's I think this will be the first kind of big retro show he's done, though, won't it?
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah.
So, though there are a lot of people in the background that your listeners or your YouTube watching people don't know about, actually.
Yeah. I mean, we have people, like I said, working on sponsorship and graphics and stuff like that in the background, and flyering and that, at events and stuff. So it all helps Ravi and me focus on doing the show itself, which is good.
Yeah.
And they're all in UK.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, all in our town actually. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Nice.
That should be easy to organize.
Yeah, IRL in real life.
And Dan always ropes the wife in, and I rope the fiance in as well. So we always use them to hand out flyers as well. We've always got spare staff.
Yeah.
Put them to work.
Yeah.
Great. So is there anything you would do different nowadays if you could restart all your retro stuff?
I mean, I think in terms of we've kind of found a good format for the show now. I know I mentioned before about doing a few little tweaks, but I think in general, it kind of what we do now works well. In the early days, I mean, some of our old episodes, we were still kind of finding our feet, as to what kind of stuff we wanted to cover, and I think it took quite a while to kind of get into the swing of knowing how much news to do every week and what people are interested in, how long to do the interviews, and kind of balancing it up. Because we cover all kinds of stuff. Like one week might be a Sega episode, next week might be Nintendo, next week might be Amiga, next week might be Sinclair Spectrum. We kind of try and keep it varied, so you don't have 2 or 3 episodes that are all kind of the same kind of theme. So I think that's something we've become a lot better at in the last couple of years, keeping it balanced and planning our guest schedule so it will be of interest to more people. So I think, Ravi and I, we kind of grew out of it. It was mainly computers that we covered on YouTube, in particular Commodore stuff, really. So we kind of grew out of that scene, really. But obviously there is a very big audience for Sega and Nintendo, a lot bigger than, the Commodore community. So getting those interested in the show as well is something that we're trying to cast the net a bit wider and get more of the console people in.
Yeah, I would have got Joe in more. Because he's a good console guy, so we got him quite late on, though, didn't we?
Yeah, I mean, he's been coming in for about 2 years now, Joe, and Joe is one of our co-hosts. He is like Mr. Sega. He's real hardcore Sega nerd. He knows everything about Sega. So often he's good to get on, and if we're doing shows about that, because he'll have knowledge that Ravi and I haven't got.
And we always do a Christmas quiz every year. And that's always really good fun. And me and Joe always lose.
Yeah, I'd say how knowledgeable he was, but maybe not.
Yeah, interesting that you talk about companies like Sega. For example, at some point we had Mr. Sega, Mario Fabian Döhler on the show. And he was like, oh, sure, we can talk about Sonic and in the old times and then talk about Sonic Mania. But when you have companies like Capcom or Nintendo, they tell you right away, we are not talking about retro. And there's zero chance we ever will. So I always found this strange that certain companies don't want to talk about their past, but they are still making money on it, re-releasing the SNES with the SNES Mini, NES Mini, or Capcom with his Legacy cartridge edition of Street Fighter and Mega Man, but they don't want to talk about their retro adventures or republishing.
Very weird. I think Sega, though, they've actually, especially more so in recent years, they seem to embrace the retro community a lot more. Even, fan projects. Sonic Mania came out of a fan project, really. Christian Whitehead and that crew. It's like you could never imagine Nintendo picking up like a Mario fan project and developing it into like an official release. But I think Sega respect their legacy a bit more. It might be because Sega haven't really got many big current, hardware or titles that are AAA titles anymore.
Right.
Yeah, I think, that they need to rely probably a bit more on their history than someone like Nintendo does. That could be part of it.
So you have the same experience I have. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we've had a lot of people on from Sega. Al Nilsson we had on recently, but Nintendo, we haven't really had anyone directly from Nintendo on the show before. And we've had people that work on Nintendo magazines and stuff, but not from Nintendo itself.
Nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah. They toe the corporate line a bit more. Maybe they've got to be careful what they say, and everything's got to be approved by the company.
Oh, yeah,
NDAs maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, well, nice. So, well, I don't know. I think I got it covered. Do you have anything left, AJ?
Well, no. Where can people go to find out about, see what you're doing, hear the podcast, hear your individual channels, or see your individual channels, I guess.
Yeah, it's all on our new website, actually. Ravi's put links to our YouTube and everything on there, too. So, theretrohour.com. And the podcast comes out every Friday. So we're recording a couple actually on Tuesday coming up. So we've got some good ones lined up actually. So we've actually had a pretty good start to 2019. So hopefully we've got some big plans for this year. So if people haven't checked out the show, they should have a look.
Nice.
And we will put links to everything in the podcast description so people can check that out and see what you guys are doing.
I appreciate that.
Great. Thanks a lot.
And you guys keep it a good word too.
Well, we try. We try.
We will. So that was Dan Wood and Ravi Abbott. Like the man said, you can check out all the things they're doing over at theretrohour.com. Us, you know where to find us because you're listening to us. So see you next time. I need to get better at doing these exits.